Hello, hi everyone. Welcome back to Woo Can Cook. My name is Wesley, and this is a show where we are slowly cooking our way through all of the food from my childhood. Today we're diving back into our series dedicated to foods from TV and film with a shot at the Korean street food dish Rabokki, inspired by this scene from the Netflix series Squid Games.
Well, I still like tteokbokki a lot more though. I'm not allowed to have it at home. Mom says it's junk food.
Eat it up then. Okay, come on. Have more tteokbokki. Excuse me, sir. One more order, okay? And mix a bunch of that in.
Alright, so first off, what they're actually eating here is a slightly more straightforward street food dish called tteokbokki. For those who are unfamiliar, tteokbokki in its simplest form features a Korean rice cake or tteok, which is then tossed in a quick gochujang and gochugaru sauce for a super quick, sweet and spicy and carb-heavy meal. This dish is commonly found in Korean night markets and food booth stalls as seen here in Squid Games, but here in the States it is also commonly found in Korean barbecue restaurants as a side dish or shared plate. In addition, as you might expect with a dish as simple as this one, it can be elaborated on in endless variations, including additional elements like fish cakes, onions, scallions, hard-boiled eggs, kimchi, cabbage, ham, carrots, cheese. That's kind of a weird one. You can honestly go wherever you want to with this one. For our version today, we're going with my personal favorite variation, which is a dish that is colloquially referred to as Rabokki, or essentially tteokbokki with ramen added. We'll also be including a few classic additions as well, including some sweet white onion, Korean fish cakes, a hard-boiled egg, and then rounding it all out with the element that I personally think elevates this whole dish to another level, which is some homemade broth made from some anchovy and dried kelp, or if that's too intimidating for you, I also have a handful of slightly simpler options as well. Okay, so let's get into it.
Couple weeks, remember when you said that you wanted to give me the world? And good for you, I guess that you've been working on yourself.
Okay, so as with many of our Woo Can Cook recipes, I'm starting things off here with 4 cloves of crushed and minced garlic. This is heading straight into our gochujang sauce base raw today, meaning that since it won't be benefiting from a wok fry as we often do, we'll want to pay particular attention to our fine mince here, otherwise we'll end up with some errant chunks of garlic floating around. Next up is half of a sweet white onion, which I'm peeling and then slicing thinly. These are also heading straight into our stock as well, so a thin slice is going to benefit that gentle cook nicely as well. Then next are my fish cakes, about 2 sheets or 6 ounces of them. If you've never seen this stuff, they are literally, as the name implies, just ground up fish mixed with some aromatics that are compressed into a patty. In Chinese markets, you'll most often find them in the refrigerated food aisle, but in Korean markets, I often find them in the frozen foods. Ours today are frozen but slightly defrosted though. I'm slicing this into 1-inch pieces and then setting it aside as well while we move on to our sauce next. Up first here, as promised, is my gochujang, or Korean fermented chili paste. This is just 1 tablespoon, but later on I also added a 2nd tablespoon to taste, so adjust for yourselves accordingly. Then next is a single tablespoon of Korean chili powder, or gochugaru. You'll recognize this from many dishes, but most prominently, for me at least, I identify this as one of the most prominent ingredients used in the seasoning of Korean kimchi. Rounding this out here is a single tablespoon of brown sugar for a bit of added malted sweetness, then followed by 4 tablespoons of soy sauce and our minced garlic. Finally, I'm switching to a fork here to whisk this all into a smooth paste, then we're setting this aside while we head over to the stove. Alright, first up here are 4 eggs, which I'm bringing to what should have been a soft boil, or about 5 minutes in a pot of simmering water. I ended up slightly overshooting this, as you'll see in a bit, but it'll still be fine. Also, go ahead and ignore these first 2 eggs that I completely fumbled on peeling too. Naturally, I would f up the easiest part of this recipe, of course. Anyway, back over on the stove, I've got my wok set up for our anchovy and kelp stock base. Now, if you want to skip this bit, I know kelp is probably going to be pretty tricky for a lot of folks to locate. I found that a Japanese powdered dashi stock is a great alternative. This stuff is made from Japanese kombu, which is a form of dried sea kelp, and you might recognize it from our katsu danburi recipe not too long ago as well. If that's still too difficult for you to locate, you can also omit it altogether and just use plain water. Obviously, it won't be the same, but in a pinch, you'll still come away with a pretty tasty rabokki though. Anyway, back to our broth here. I'm starting things off with 4 cups of water plus about half a cup or 1 handful's worth of anchovy and 2 to 3 pieces of our dried sea kelp. Then I'm covering this up, bringing it to a boil and letting it simmer for 30 minutes. 30 minutes later, we should be greeted by a stock that is now thoroughly infused with all of this wonderfully fishy, salty, and briny umami. Then next I'm adding my tteok to the wok for a solid 5-minute head start. These things are very dense, which means that they will take significantly longer to cook than any of the other more delicate additions today. Once they're fork tender, or edible when you bite it, I'm adding my onions, ramen, and fish cake to the wok. I'm also adding a little bit more water here as well because my stock started to reduce a little bit faster than I'd like. I'm giving this all a turn to let that ramen loosen up, then I'm letting everything simmer for another 2 minutes to let our fish cakes cook through as well. Finally, I'm rounding this all out with our sauce base here and giving this one more toss to combine. Your stock should have reduced to a fairly thick and cohesive sauce at this point, like so. If it's still too loose, go ahead and let that reduce to your liking though. Then finally, I'm removing this from heat, adding my medium boiled egg, Then I'm finishing with some black and white sesame seeds and green onions, which I forgot to film somehow, and we're ready to eat. Alright, so for those following along with this series, we have now done a number of very involved recipes of late. Our xiaolongbao recipe last week was a 2-day ordeal, so I'm a big fan of how simple and approachable this particular dish is. It's hearty and filling, it has a deep, rich umami coming from our anchovy and kelp stock, and of course, our gochujang and gochugaru sauce give it a wonderfully sweet and spicy heat to round it all out. This was also a super fun opportunity to work with the Korean tteok rice cake as well. I've done a few dishes with the Chinese equivalent niangao, which is essentially the same thing but more commonly sliced into coin shapes. It does cook slightly differently in most Chinese stir fries though because of its shape, and as many of you know, these cultural parallels are always super interesting to me. Then finally, the addition of our ramen here to round everything out makes this a really classic comfort food for me that just reminds me of those cold 70-degree Bay Area winter days, filling up on ramen before dinner. If you're looking for a quick, fairly pantry-friendly meal to throw together, this is a great one to take a shot at. Okay, so that's it everyone. I hope you enjoyed this and I hope you give this one a shot. For those who are new to the channel, this one is part of a larger series that we've been doing that's dedicated entirely to foods from TV and film. So definitely check out that series next because there's a lot of these. We'll also be cooking through this one live next Tuesday at 6:30 PST right here on the YouTube channel. So tune in and come cook along with me if you want as well. For the Bay Area locals, the Woo Can Cook fried rice pop-up is back at the Hayward Farmers Market next Saturday. So swing by and come say hi if you can. More about that at woocancook.com/eats. As always, like, comment, subscribe, be nice humans, and I'll see you soon.